In today's video, I'm going to go through 10 common watercolor mistakes you might be making as a beginner, and I will be demonstrating what I'm doing to avoid those mistakes with this watercolor spring painting. If you're a beginner or if you're still trying to improve your watercolor skills, this video is going to be very valuable since the mistakes I'm going to talk about today apply to watercolor painting in general, not just landscapes. And just so you know, I've made all these mistakes and I still make some of them. So I'm hoping my feedback on the topics I'm coloring here will help you out. I'm not going to go through the supplies I used today, but you will find all of that in the description of this video, along with the colors I have used in this painting, if you want to try and recreate this landscape. Hi, I'm Françoise. Welcome back to my channel. Before we start, I want to make it clear that as disagreeable as it can be, making mistakes is completely fine if not necessary to improve. It's totally part of the process, so don't beat yourself up if you're making any of these. Just keep painting and you will get better over time. The purpose of this video is to help you get there quicker. Without further ado, let's get right into the 10 common watercolor mistakes we want to avoid making in watercolor painting. The first mistake you might be making is to overlook how important it is to pick a color scheme and prep your colors before you start painting. Besides the fact that having a color palette all ready to go will help you assess if the colors you picked go well together, you will also avoid problems like noticeable harsh lines in your painting in those areas where the colors need to mingle and mix together when everything is still wet. This has happened to me before in skies or other large areas where I hadn't planned my mixes well enough and I was wasting some time mixing paints while the paper was drying. Prepping your colors ahead of time will also help you with contrast by having some light, average, and dark values in your mixes. I'll talk about this more specifically later on in the video to show you how painting with light, average, and dark values can improve a painting. And also, having a color palette at hand will allow you to make some sort of mental plan for the painting process and make you more confident getting into it. For instance here, I decided ahead of time I was going to add flowers at the bottom of the painting with my red color. And I also decided all these greens weren't going to show up in the trees and grass only, because I guessed I would be able to use them to create interest in the mountains as well. If I hadn't focused on my color scheme and color mixes, I may not have thought of that, or I may not have had time to make these additions in time before things dry. Now, your style and the way you like to paint might not require you to plan too much. Some people don't even like too much planning. But if you're a beginner, thinking about colors and making mixes ahead of time is really going to save you the time, mistakes, and stress, so you can focus more on perfecting your watercolor techniques and enjoy the process fully. The second mistake you might be making is to skip the sketch or overwork it with too many details. One thing I have learned through all the classes I've taken on websites like Skillshare or Teachable, and I've taken many from a lot of different people, is to keep the sketches simple and use them as a guide to where the main elements are going to be. I tried this for myself to make my videos on this channel, and this has helped me improve tremendously instead of scratching my head wondering how to get this or that detail in while painting. The truth is that keeping a sketch simple is going to help with keeping your painting as simple as possible also, without getting lost in the details. The beauty of watercolors is you can always add details towards the end, especially when you start getting comfortable with the process and you start mastering various techniques. I get that making a full elaborate painting from a few pencil strokes might seem very hard to grasp if you're getting started with watercolors, because not long ago I used to feel very intimidated by landscape painting. I simply didn't know where to start. But you will see over time that practicing and learning the main techniques will help you better envision how you can turn those simple lines into a beautiful painting using layers and various techniques. I know it's very cliche, but it's the truth, and if you hang in there, you will develop that ability to decide how to get from A to Z when you want to paint something from scratch. The third mistake you might be making is not to think of the order in which to paint each element. This mistake may cause you to waste a lot of time waiting for the paint to dry, or to have your paint bleeding into unwanted areas if it's still wet. This is especially true with a painting like this one, where there's a lot going on. The sky, 3 mountains, a cabin, a fence, and a bunch of trees overlapping all of that, and a bunch of slopes in the grass. That's a lot of elements to take care of. The usual way to go for landscape painting is top to bottom and background to foreground. This is what I was planning to do here at first, except that I would have had to wait for the sky to dry, then the first mountain, and so on till I got to the bottom. So instead, I painted the sky and then I concentrated on parts like the roof and the grass, since none of these are touching. I kept doing this until I was done and I managed to get everything to look nice and defined. The fourth mistake you might be making is to get into the painting without thinking of what techniques will give you the look you're going for. For instance, I wanted a very natural look for those rocks that are scattered in the grass, so I decided to use the wet on dry technique in order to preserve some white areas in the paper. If I had, let's say, used the wet in wet technique, which could also work very well here for grass, I would have had more trouble saving those tiny white areas. And I may have realized a bit too late that I needed to either mask the parts where I wanted my rocks with some masking fluid to keep them paper white, or I would have had to change plans and use the dark color to paint the rocks on top of the grass. Either way, I learned the hard way that not thinking through what techniques best suit my vision for a painting can make the process a bit less smooth, and sometimes I've had to start painting over and over till I get things right. The fifth mistake you might be making is to overwork your painting. I've been guilty of that a lot, and I tend to do it still. Overworking a painting can be that you're adding too many layers or too many details. I've had it happen to me with grass and trees before. I added so many layers that I lost the transparency and it ended up looking more like gouache than watercolor. The challenge in this painting for me was again the trees and the grass. For instance, there are various slopes in the grass and several color variations, so it's very tempting to add loads of details. So what I chose to do, to keep it simple and let the beauty of watercolors shine through, was to apply a light wash of one single shade of green with a little bit of the other greens I selected. I left the lightest area in the grass towards the middle untouched throughout the painting, and I have to confess this was very hard for me at this stage of my watercolor journey. All I did when this first wash was dry was to add touches of darker greens here and there to emphasize the direction of the slopes and shadows, and you can tell it is enough to suggest the details we see in the reference picture. The sixth mistake you might be making is to lack the patience to wait till things dry. This links back to not planning the order in which you paint each element, and this is why if you're not patient, I recommend you to do a little planning or at least to use a hairdryer to speed up the drying time. Countless times as a beginner have I seen my paint bleed into an area I didn't want it to go, just because it wasn't completely dry. This can ruin a painting depending on what it is and your ability to fix the mistake. In this painting, I wanted my three mountains to look distinct from each other, with a tiny bit of detail in each one, with treetops showing and the variation in color as well. To achieve that, I had to paint them separately, wait for the sky to dry to paint the first mountain, and so on. The seventh mistake you might be making is to use the wrong paintbrush. If you're trying to paint a background with a tiny brush, this is going to be very tedious. In the same way, trying to get into tiny places with a big brush will be very tricky. Using the right brush is everything, and it will be handy to have a selection if you paint a lot. I don't regret investing in a few sizes of round paintbrushes. I also have a flat one for large areas, and I use these very thin ones for details. I use them for every type of painting I do. If I tried to paint this cabin or those rocks with my Raphael round brush, I know it wouldn't turn out this good. The eighth mistake you might be making is to forget entirely about contrast. I was talking about it earlier when I mentioned how important it is to plan your color scheme. You can see here that I'm adding those slopes and shadows on the grass. Around the house, I'm using a very dark green. This really makes this area stand out against the very light green I applied previously. The house also comes to life more when we add details with dark tones. I used a dark brown mixed to a neutral tint shade here to strengthen contrast on the very light gray I painted the roof with. Contrast also helps driving focus on one part of your painting, and once you master this aspect of watercolors, you will be able to create paintings that catch the eye more and look more realistic. The ninth mistake you might be making is to ignore basic rules that could make your painting look a bit off. Take a landscape painting like this one. An important rule for landscapes is to go darker and add more detail as you get closer to the foreground. This is what I did here. Take a look at the mountains, for instance. The mountain in the back will look like it's farther away if you make it way lighter and much less detailed. If you're not sure, take a look at any reference photo and study it. Here, each mountain got a little bit darker than the one behind it and a bit more detailed. At first, I was using a very light wash of perylene green and red Then I used a darker one for the second mountain, and I even added some other colors. And for the mountain closer to us, I used more greens and brighter colors in general with a lot more detail. All this creates depth in the painting and it helps with realism and a good harmony overall. The 10th mistake you might be making is to skip adding texture and highlights. There are a lot of ways to do that, and it's really going to make a painting look really nice, polished, and again, if you're into realism, this will help a lot too. In my painting, I added some dry paint on the roof of the cabin to create texture, and after painting the fence, I also highlighted it with some white gel pen to make it stand out more. I use white gel pens a lot and sometimes white gouache in everything, portraits, florals, landscapes. They really help brighten up a piece and emphasize shapes. Adding highlights and details are my favorite part in every piece of art because it makes every painting look so much nicer. Like I said in the beginning, don't beat yourself up if you're making some or all of these mistakes frequently. It's part of the process. But if you sticked around until now, I hope you did gain some clarity on the steps you can take to avoid these common watercolor mistakes. If you enjoyed this video, please leave me a comment, give it a thumbs up, or share it on social media. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to know about all my future videos. Thanks for watching and see you next time!